Hey everyone, welcome to the McNuttiest Dimension. I'm Chris McNutt. Glad you could stop by. Tune in today to episode number 10. Made it to double digits. Big shout out and thanks to all my supporters, all you listeners who are enjoying the show, all my guests who have been nothing but superb and terrific to this point. I'm so happy that folks like yourself are tuning in, enjoying the McNuttiest Dimension Consciousness Salon, a place where, let's just take a break, check out how this joint is working. It's like we're always driving around our cars with someplace we need to get, and it's time to just take a break, stop, get out of the car, flip up the hood, look at the engine, check the fluid levels, check the tire pressure. Maybe you want to put a nitro boost in there. It's your car, it's your experience, it's your journey. Do whatever you like, but take a moment. Just have a look at it, explore consciousness behind all of this, because me, if you're listening, I kind of assume you're sort of into the world of awakening, a path of lightening the load a little bit, exploring what else is out there. But, another question is, why does this drive exist within us? Why are we seeking and reaching and exploring these new or other domains of consciousness? Where's that drive coming from? Now, some would say it's because, you, me, everything there is all part of divine consciousness. That's the reality of what we're living in, this holographic universe. Every single part of it is, all fragments are part of the whole. So you have the spark of infinity within you, and the most divine source, everythingness, is within us. But we live in this reality, this third dimensional trip we're on in human form. We've gone through amnesia, and we don't really have a frickin' clue what's going on from this perspective, but that's also part of the puzzle. That's the journey. That's why we popped in here in human form. It's this giant Rubik's Cube that we've been given that we're trying to figure out, how do we get back to the source energy? Even though some say we can access it at any time, such is the paradox and the conundrum that we've been given. So for myself and a lot of other people, it seems like this slow journey of work, and even though some say it should just all be presence, and work is just an illusion and concept in the mind, yes, I'm hooked into that as well, but it just seems gradual. And it is a little by little the openings take place. But what happens if you're given a sudden big ass jolt of awakening, a blast of the good stuff, so to speak? Because that experience happens for many people out there, that it's very sudden, and the opening can go from narrow to quite wide in an instant, and these blasts of divine energy and opening of higher dimensions and consciousness and energy are not always easy to deal with. It's why the yogis and the lamas and the mystical traditions of this world, and some say going back into galactic history with the Vegan schools of mysticism that originated off planet, from where the lineages of yoga and Buddhism and mystical schools here on Earth now take their root, that exploration has been taking place for millions of years. And one of the practices is that this opening takes place gradually, because, in our system here in 3D, like, we're wired and we have some physicality and we have nervous systems and that are structured in a certain way. And it's like electrical current going through the wires in your house. They're only rated to take a certain voltage or ampage of current. So if you put too much through, you blow fuses in your breaker. Or it's like plumbing, where you got a garden hose, but you can't put the city water main worth of water through that garden hose. So if that happens to you, which is sort of what happens energetically with big blasts of energy that can come through when we're suddenly open to other dimensions or consciousness, or energy rips through us. Our system is not physically or neurologically ready to take it, which is why the practice of yoga and the mystical practices like that gradually work on the opening, like increasing the diameter of your pipe, or the wiring within our system continually expands in order to be able to take on these higher levels of energy and voltage and current that comes through. But if you get a big blast of it, then it can be very difficult to deal with, even though there's a lot of traditions where it's an active practice to try to awaken the Kundalini energy, and some describe it as this energy. It's like a serpent that resides in the base of our spine, and you activate it, and it goes on up through the chakras and up through the spine, awakening as it goes. And that's one description of Kundalini energy. And Kundalini has also become this catchphrase for just intense energy awakening that many people experience. And like all things awakening, it's very unique and it's very personal. And how it happens to individuals depends on, what their karma is, what their wiring is, what their ego is like, and what blockages it needs to go through. And then that becomes the trip of intense energy going through the system, and all the constraints, like the little sections of the plumbing that are like really narrow pipes, all of a sudden that this intense surge of energy is trying to get through. And that is an intense experience for many people, like my guest today. Stephen Potter is a professional acupuncturist, but he's also spent the last 25 years of his life living with what he describes as a very intense experience of Kundalini energies in his system on a daily basis. And his journey through various practices and explorations of consciousness has been driven by the requirement to manage this intense energy flow that is present with him almost constantly. So to hear more about this wonderful, beautiful journey of Stephen's, let's give a big, warm McNuttiest dimension welcome to my guest today, Stephen Potter. So, Stephen, welcome. So glad you could join us.
Thanks for inviting me, Chris.
And you'd say that this journey started for you in a way with the music and the rave scene where you were growing up in northern England. So set the stage for us a little bit. Tell us what that scene was like and your experience there.
Yeah, sure. This is, late 80s, early 90s. I moved to Birmingham, and it was there that I really started to love dancing, and just found it was my thing, I could just dance for hours and hours and hours. And
how old are you at this time?
Early 20s. And, it was exploding all over England, the rave scene, techno, house, whatever, drum and bass, all this explosion of creativity and new music. And it was just so exciting. And I just loved it. Yeah. And being dragged off the dance floor at midday, after being dancing for 12 hours or something. And,
right. And it wasn't just dance, right? This is sort of like the psychotropics are also involved with this whole scene for you and many others.
Sure, MDMA or ecstasy was a big part of it, and still, some LSD kicking around and amphetamines and things, and done, for great enjoyment, and and it was a great shift for people in society at large in England. These days they give it, couples therapy and this kind of thing, and it's becoming more legitimized. But I saw, I grew up in Liverpool, and going out in Manchester, you could be stabbed pretty easily, and I saw some terrible things, and
just street violence, fighting culture, alcohol, that sort of thing was really
totally. And it just shifted within the space of a few months. I remember, Manchester City. I went over there. And someone smashed the window of the car, chased me down the street, pissing on me, shouting Scouser and all this. The next time, 6 months later, they came over to Liverpool, and they're all waving inflatable bananas and singing songs and blowing bubbles.
And this is the football. This is football.
This was football terrace culture, and music, football, fashion, the whole thing. It's kind of, the youth culture at the time was, a big part of everyone's lives. And then I went over to the Hacienda, which was like a big, club in Manchester, and everyone's just coming up and hugging you, and didn't matter where you were from anymore. Instead of stabbing you or taking you out back and beating the shit out of you. Exactly. Yeah. So, in that way, ecstasy was really a great thing for personal sort of, liberation. I, had direct experience of what, of love and community, and just being open and honest and sharing with people. Because you go back after raves and just chat for hours to people about all kinds of things, and it was just fantastic. So how much did the music also kind of play a part in this, the beat and the hours on the dance floor and the trance and that sort of thing? How much was that part of the mystical experience? Yeah, a massive part. It's like you say, the trance and the repetitive nature of the music, and it just, this beat and the bass frequencies just take hold of the body. And then when you give yourself to the rhythm for hour after hour, as people have been dancing around, fire and drumming for millennia, you certainly, it was a very common thing where people would say, I got this feeling of like everyone's been dancing like this for thousands of years, and we're just keying into something that's very much part of our shared cultural heritage, that we kind of forgot about by just making it this thing you did when you got drunk and tried to, introduce yourself to a lady or whatever, and then removing that from the equation. It was just purely about dancing again, tribal and kind of primitive and that sort of experience. And you realize just, wow, I haven't thought for hours. I haven't thought of anything for hours, and I'm just totally at one with the body and the movement and the rhythm and totally absorbed in it. Total absorption. So you got the music, you got the psychedelics, and tell us the tale of how that led into your opening experience. Yeah. So New Year's Eve, 95, 96, I think I was 25, and had been out all night, and then got chatting to a girl, this friend Elaine, and she just said to me, Steve, are you spiritual? And it was just like, wow, I don't know, I guess maybe. That's, ex-Catholic, hated the church, just saw it as a repressive
And up
authoritarian.
to this time, no, you hadn't like read that first book on Buddhism. You hadn't picked up the Upanishads or, had any of those sort of influences.
Not on my radar or anyone's radar in my cultural circle at all. No. Bill Hicks. I don't know if you've watched much Bill Hicks, he was probably the first person that was kind of like, bringing into my circle this idea that, you could take psychedelics and discover something else going on in life, a spiritual dimension. So he opened me up to the possibility of it. And then I'd been having episodes of deja vu and sort of premonition and in dreams and things like this. So things had started to get a little
shifty in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was a shift occurring. So when she asked me that question, I was kind of like, yeah, sure, maybe, why not? So she's like, well, let's have some more acid and go for a walk and chat about it. So that's what we did, and had a great time. Ended up back at her house and lying in bed. And this is way after the peak of the acid. This is like, 12, 14 hours after taking it. And, but it, if you've ever taken LSD, it, moves through the system and just sort of, you work through all the heaviness of the thought patterns and the ego and stuff until you're just left at this very light, kind of thoughtless state. And I was just lying in bed, just thinking, wow, there's just nothing going on. But yet here I am. This is nuts. Like for what felt like minutes and minutes and minutes, and there's just no thoughts, no extrapolations on things and wondering about things. It was just pure awareness. And this just created this gap where something else could come in. And this something else was this flow of energy that I felt at first sort of in the belly. And as I acknowledged it, it kind of grew. And then I was like, Elaine, is this coming from you? But I'm just like thinking it in my head. And immediately there's this bigger flow of energy and it just, big glow kind of responds. And then I'm like, Elaine, this is you. And she just giggles and it's like, yeah, okay, this is happening. She's transmitting this energy. Okay. And then it just comes up into my heart and just my heart just exploded in this loving energy. And as I sort of acknowledged it again, it expanded and grew and then just came up into the mind and filling the head. And from there, it just kind of went up through the crown and to what I would call the higher self, which was a very real, solid feeling thing about second brain or something 6 foot above the head.
Like it was obvious to you. You'd never experienced that before, but you had the knowing that's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. And so this sort of second brain is like separate from the separate ego brain, what I took from my normal brain, and so it just kind of took over, and then so I'm looking around and realizing that there's no difference between my body and the bed and the air. Everything is just a dance of kind of vibratory wave like energy and molecules, and some is more dense than others, but there's essentially no difference. So of course it's like I'm just at one with the room. There's no boundaries or anything. And then as I start looking at it and looking at it and looking at it, I can see that the gaps in the spaces in these molecules, and in the gaps there's light, but it's a light that is more radiant and clear and more real than any light that I've seen before. That's, coming from the sun or from a lamp or something. And I'm just like, and there's a quality to it. It's it's like life-giving and loving and divine. It's the only word I can use to describe it. Is it's
Did
divine.
that come to you at the time?
Yes, yeah, totally. It was just like, wow, this is divine light. And then I'm like, but if it's divine light, that means there's a divine being, there's a divineness, there's a God. And then there's just this like, this little chuckle from, just behind me. And I'm like, God? And like, yeah, Steve. And then just this wave of eternal, unconditional love of just flew through me. And so I'm just laughing and just going, for real? God, really? Yes, Steve. Yeah. It's real. It's true. And you're just speechless, I mean, just like bathing in this divine light and love. And God was just like, it's true, it's safe, you're loved, you will always be loved, you will always be known by God,
Was it audible? Was it like a word being spoken to you?
Totally audible. Just this conversation we're having now. Yeah. Except it was from a radiance kind of up here. So you can kind of just see some bright light or something, but not fully in awareness, It was just, So.
And how long did that go on for? You're lying in the bed with your friend. Mm-hmm. And how long did that experience last? If you even
to say,
have a sense of time.
Yeah, sent a couple of, about an hour at the peak, I would say. So kind of the radiant light kind of like receded a bit. God said, you'll always be loved. And then that was the message, and then it kind of receded. And then I'm just like, in my head, did that just happen, Elaine? And she's laughing and just saying, yeah, that just happened. And I was just like, wow. So what do we do? And she's like, well, we could go flying. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, just try, because you're not constrained by, we're talking in our head, so we're not constrained by the physical body anymore. I'm like, right, okay. So then I just kind of like slipped out of the body and then was up on the ceiling looking down. I'm like, okay, this is freaky. And then she like, I got this sense of her just sort of like taking me by the hand, and we floated out the window and up above the house. And I looked down, and then something kicked in and I was back in. So there was a little bit of astral projection. And when I went to leave, it was like I could see the trees were no longer like these inanimate objects. They were like living, breathing beings sparkling with divine energy, and the whole world was just, I just saw it all anew, and that lasted like another day or two.
Wow. So this is just, the acid trip just kept on going in a way, even though it wasn't necessarily the LSD speaking anymore.
Yeah, the LSD opens you up. And there's a flavor to it because you've got that in your system. But yeah, it's like, I've taken LSD since, and having a peak experience on LSD is very different to this first experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's ego mind Stephen thinking during all of this? How is that relationship going down?
Good question. Freaking out, like don't have any words to describe it. I'm totally unaware of Kundalini or subtle body or chakras or any of that language, and so it takes me, the next year or two is pretty.
This keeps going for that.
That's it. Now, 25 years later, yeah,
It's still going.
It's still going, yeah.
So then what was that first year like? What was that transition and adjustment like?
Rough would be a word. So this energy that when the ego isn't getting in the way, when the chakras are aligned, when the crown is open and can fully manifest, is a thing of of divine, wondrous and wonder and beauty. But when the ego is attached to a lot of things, a lot of desires and fears and anger and emotions, and when the channels, the subtle energy is blocked through toxins and very and bad diet and things like this, and all of these subtleties that I'm totally unaware of.
So what was your 25-year-old self like? Were you like, did you have a good diet, or were you just like drinking lots of beer and smoking darts?
You got it. My life was pretty much was very hedonistic. And also quite poor. So Snickers and chocolate milk. In England there's a chippy on every corner. So yeah, chips, chocolate bar. I remember a friend bringing some apples back from the market, and they sat in the bowl and went off for a week because nobody touched them. Fruit. Yeah, I don't know.
So in that environment, you're just, not the healthiest guy, but I mean, welcome to your 20s. That's kind of how it goes down for a lot of us. And you have this, what you now call a Kundalini, as just a word, or that uses a descriptor that a lot of people kind of relate to in some way.
Yeah, I guess it's a handy word for I was walking around, people just saying, it's like I'm made of liquid and there's this liquid flowing through me, and sometimes it's really nice and sometimes it gets stuck and it's really painful. And like if you've got like water that can't move and it builds up into a pressure until like the pipe bursts or something, that's what it feels like. It feels like my head is going to explode.
Wow, you're feeling this. You're feeling this physically.
Oh, very, very physically. Very physically.
Regularly, like would these waves go up and down, like within the hour, within the day, within the week? Like what was its kind of like wavelength of that? Where was it really erratic and chaotic?
Erratic and chaotic, yeah. And so I started to try and get a handle on it, and the first place I landed was doing Qigong and getting acupuncture, and hence my, devotion to acupuncture and Qigong. I'm an acupuncturist. I, and saw that it really, moved me along in great, to a great extent.
But before you found that, you're with a group of friends who like, there's, you're not hanging out with spiritual people. Did you even like, somehow with synchronicity, did like books come into your, field at all? Or did any of that stuff start to happen along the path, or were you really just kind of stumbling around in the dark on your own?
There's some new agey things. The Celestine Prophecy. Do you remember that one? Yeah. Sounded great, but I couldn't manifest it, just seemed like somebody else's dream. It wasn't my dream, and then started to just suddenly notice it's like, oh, there's a Buddhist center around the corner, When did that open? Oh, so I go in and check this Buddhist center out, and, and then there's another Buddhist center up the road. What's that all about? Why is there two Buddhist centers? So then you start to realize, oh, there's different schools in Buddhism. And the first one, New Kadampa tradition. Don't know if you've ever come across that.
Is that Theravedic or?
It's a guy. I think he's Tibetan, Gyatso, something. But it's like a bit cultish. You're only supposed to read his books or something, and it was all a bit weird. And so that's when you get the first inkling of like, hey, just because you've got Kundalini flowing and you've met God, it doesn't mean that every sign is going to lead to something, some big, brilliant, beautiful thing. Sometimes the sign is that you need to learn that you don't just listen to every idiot, you know? You've got to create some discernment here and still engage the mind. And you need to get the spiritual dimension, the higher self, and the separate ego mind in some kind of harmony. You know, you can't just be open and naive and guided by these signs or something. You know, I was getting little twinkles everywhere, and and you feel like you're being guided by these little signs and stuff. But then I was just like, wow, I'm gonna drive myself crazy trying to follow all this secret path of mysticism or something, and I was just getting led down so many strange alleyways and stuff, you know. And
so what was the first one that really struck you and like, okay, there's some value here, what was the first one that kind of really hit you on some deep level?
Trungpa. So Tibetan Buddhism, Chogyam Trungpa. The way he described what he calls drala, the energy, and putting it to constructive use, like he calls the way of the warrior, the Shambhala path, is harnessing the energy and putting it to a sort of a righteous purpose, you know. And the way he described the monkey mind, not even knowing that it's in a cage, and that really, like, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't even know that I was operating from a delusion until I had this massive, shift in consciousness.
So you have this shift, but again, like, it didn't negate, it didn't have some magical power to take away all the, some say the lower qualities, the ego mind, that's ripping around. That stuff was still, you're still a guy in your 20s and that stuff's still firing around like everybody else.
For sure. Yeah. It's, and in a way, the energy can distort the ego into a feeling of superiority, and which can be very dangerous as well, So it can enhance an ego and the mind into you thinking that you've got some kind of access to special powers and you're different and you're this and that, and really it's a very humbling experience to realize you're not. You're just the same horny, addicted idiot you were 2 years before or whatever,
It came in through my lower chakras, expanded up out of my crown, filled me full of bliss and wonder, except the times it left me feeling down. Didn't anybody tell me this is how I'm gonna be? Mind and body of a normal human, but ripping through with Kundalini, oh yeah. Chogyam, who's, spoke to you first, his life was a bit of a Kundalini acid trip in general.
Yeah, right. Finding out that, that he was riding some crazy energy and didn't handle it particularly well in many aspects as well, And so that is like, wow, okay, fuck, you can be like a Buddhist master and still fucked up by this.
And be a mess.
And be a total mess, So that was a really like, okay, I'm not the only one going through this, Stop beating yourself up, for not being this perfect being, and just get on with just inch by inch trying to sort it out, So I'm trying to think, the next big shift for me was Rupert Spira, who is a direct path, non-dual teacher, and his meditations really enabled me to kind of disentangle from identifying with the Kundalini, with the ego mind, with the sensations, and get to this place of more equanimity and just allowing and just being the witness.
Right. He's pretty straight up like non-dual, just, witness and sit and watch.
Yeah.
Watch the watcher and all of that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So I found that really useful.
What was it like? What did that feel like to have sort of that experience? That maybe, was it a bit of detachment where you, as you say, you had a bit of perspective on something that you were at one time kind of like in it, as kind of claustrophobic? Did it feel like there was now some like spaciousness around it in some way?
Yeah. That's a good way of describing it. There's an inner space that you, but the ego is attached to the sensations and identifying with the sensations as the self. And so, Rupert Spira is very good at saying, well, what is experiencing this? What is the experiencer? Who are you? Who is the experiencer? And do I exist? What am I? And then you're just like, I do exist. I do. And he's just like, well, what is saying, what exists? And you just, this knowing awareness exists. And he's like, yes, that's it. You are this knowing awareness. That's it. It's like, wow. And so every night I'm listening to these meditations, and just for a few minutes, 5 minutes, I'm totally free. And that's a great feeling. When you've been for years caught up in your struggle, trying to control and manipulate this energy to move in a certain way, trying to control the, negative thoughts and the harmful emotions and this whole thing, and then all of a sudden you're just like, it's just the ego again, trying to control the ego. That's why you're not getting anywhere. and taking this step back and as the witnessing, knowing awareness, and you just like suddenly see, if you don't get caught up in that game, there's no game, which is a great realization.
So do you think that experience that you have, like many of us, I've spent time in non-dual meditation as well, was it aided by this kind of Kundalini energy that was kind of opened it? Did it help? Or were you just like the rest of us who had to kind of like grind through that realization to get to that point? Or has this also helped to just kind of like smooth the pathway in some way for you?
I'm not in your head, so I don't know. My experience of it feels profound in that there's no separation. I don't know if that's how other people experience it, and that this was very real and tangible. It's not like a theoretical process or something. It's like, when I take the position as knowing awareness, I am very much knowing awareness, and it's a very spacious experience that, this knowing awareness extends for a long way, and is there and sinks back and is deep and spacious and goes down into the ground. And that is like a deep rooting into the ground. And I find that's when and then you kind of like spread out, and then you come up into and you realize there's no separation between you and the other objects. But those objects are also awareness. So that's the thing where, because yeah, I think you mentioned before, like you can get, there's a separation and an emptiness and a spaciousness to sort of the initial non-dual realization, but it can also be a little empty, devoid, the void. You can kind of feel like you're in a void. And so the next stage is the reintegration into, so that there's no separation. And that reintegration and seeing that all manifestations are awareness and that there's no separation from awareness. You just are awareness and everything is awareness. So it's like at first you're caught up in this, and then you separate out from it, and then you re-merge with it, but you're free. There's a freeness to re-merging and being one.
And along with this, was it because you're talking about the void and the emptiness in that experience? Was it dry, or was there also a richness of the heart space and sort of the joyfulness accompanying this experience for you, or maybe even both? Because I've heard it described in both ways.
And that's where I always come back to the Tibetan Buddhist lineage, because they're very much about the loving compassion practice, and it can certainly the void feels empty, and there's a nihilism to it or something. It's like, well, what's nothing's real, nothing matters. Why do anything? There's nothing to achieve, and then. Like if what we're really looking for is to have an enjoyable, happy existence, this doesn't feel right. There should be more. There's more to this, and then so going back to the Buddhist practices of visualization and mantra and then getting these very tangible, beautiful grace waves emanating from a picture of the Dalai Lama or a picture of the Vajrayana, the Avalokiteshvara, or any of the lineage tree.
And did you practice? Was this a formal thing? Did you go and study in the Tibetan tradition?
I did. I studied to the extent, that I read fairly extensively, Snow Lion publications, Shambhala publications, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment is a good one. Studied, I went to Dharamsala and hung out.
India?
In India, yeah. Quick aside for the meeting the Dalai Lama was a beautiful occasion. I don't know if you've been to Dharamsala. There's the Dalai Lama's residence, and then there's the Gompa, the temple, and there's like a little courtyard in between. So I heard he'd be walking through at this time, so I stood next to this tiny little Tibetan guy who's like 120 or something, and he's sort of crouched there, and the Dalai Lama comes through, and of course it's he's a reincarnated Buddha. He's a very important person in Tibetan culture. So he comes over and blesses the old guy next to me, and then as he does the blessing, he kind of finishes, and then he turns and just glances at me and smiles, and it was like being right back at that initial opening. It's like, wow, this guy is for real. There's whatever he's doing, I'll have some of that. Yeah.
And you felt that? Oh,
totally. And I should say, I met the Karmapa a couple of weeks later. The young guy, not the 16th, the 17th Karmapa, totally different. He was in the void. and he just looked and transmitted the void. And that was, you felt like you'd just been dropped on the outer edges of the solar system for a moment, and you experienced deep space and then came back, and it was like, wow, very different energy from the two guys. Yeah. So the Dalai Lama is very, very much about the loving compassion, and it feels great to have that as the center of your being, as your guiding principle, that you are loving and compassionate to all beings, no exceptions, and taking that as your ground of being, and then it prevents a lot of the depression, I think, that can set in with some people, and nihilism and stuff, if you're just hanging out in this sort of eternal spacious void.
Were you experiencing any of that throughout the years? This is because meeting the Dalai Lama, how many years after is this your initial experience we're talking?
About 7 years.
And in that time, was there sort of like ups and downs? Were you also, depressed, as well as this elation and, moments of bliss that you were getting from the opening?
Yes, definitely. Obviously it wasn't, initially you feel like you've been handed the monopoly, go meet God card, do not pass go, collect 200, it's like, woo, and I'm home. And then you realize it's like, no, you've done all the way around. Now you're back at square one, and you've got to work your way all the way back. And that's what it felt like. You had to work your way all the way back. Yeah. It felt like it didn't push you ahead. It was like even took you a little. It's a motivating factor. It's a motivating force. It won't let you forget that this is what you're here to do. But apart from that, it was a monumental fucking pain in the ass, pain in the head, pain in the back, pain down the legs, pain, any and everywhere. Your nervous system is on fire. You're massively sensitive to all kinds of external stimulus. I'm totally unaware of this. I'm still, drinking coffee, smoking, and all this kind of stuff. And then slowly I let go of those things, and and start running and get in shape, and start doing qigong and yoga, and start meditating and doing acupuncture, and things improve. But there's no magic bullet, because the more you get on, the more you realize, the defilements, the blockages become subtle, become more and more subtle. And so, you can do all this stuff and it's purifying. But, if you are getting up from the meditation mat and swearing internally at the guy on the bus because he hasn't got his money or something, you're just like, come on, you fucking idiot. And you're just like, okay, yeah, I'm still full of reaction and anger and these kinds of things. And so it becomes a constant process of monitoring the internal thoughts process, and realizing that you've got to get to the root of these. You've got to uproot these deep habits of mind.
It sounds like you're describing just doing the work, like that so many of us have done in various formats, without having had these big opening experience like you did. But it's still grinding it out, doing the work. You're human. You got all this crap in our system and experience and trauma and habits and shit that we're dealing with, and you were working it out like in some way like the rest of us.
Yeah, 100%. Nobody gets a free pass. Nobody. And, we've all got, stuff to work through. And yet you're still having this experience that you said that continues to this day, that can open you up and you get a little glimpse of the bliss of God. Yeah.
Is there any relationship there? As you say, that initial experience was kind of like a being, like you sensed a being and consciousness, and you heard the laughter, you heard a voice talking. Has a relationship of any kind continued along those lines?
At first, I felt abandoned and lost and confused. And then realizing that, that's not how it is. God is not holding most people's hands through life, pops into your life, says hi, and then it's gone again, and it's down to you to, establish a path that brings you back to God. And I feel that I'm somewhat back in relation with God, with the source of life, and I get signs that this is going well, and things are moving in the right direction.
So you got some Rupert Spira, you got some Tibetan Buddhism. Was there anything else of great import that kind of helped you along the way? People, teachers?
Yeah. So Ken Wilber was very useful in, if you read a lot of Ken Wilber, he's read a lot of stuff, and he synthesizes that information into a handy, book. And I found that was a great education in all the, the wisdom traditions. And then he, shows this process for how he's come to create this map, which he calls like the integral map. And I found that very useful, realizing that, there are dimensions to being, of which there's an internal dimension with then different strata on the internal dimension. And then there's the external dimension as well. So like I was saying earlier, it's like, you can do, work, energy work, and, and different things, and meditation and stuff. But then how is that relating to the external? And so, what's your personality like? What's your, what are your habits like? What is your job like? What is how you act in the world is a reflection of the inner work. And the way he has this map of the 4 quadrants. So there's, the personal internal, the personal external, the social internal, and the social external. And I found that sort of integral map to be really, really useful.
And it led you have a career in the healing arts.
Yeah, exactly. And that was instrumental in me saying, I want to be doing something of service that resonates, with me, that I enjoy getting up in the morning and not being like, oh, fuck, it's Monday morning again, I didn't want that. And, I'd tried being creative and doing the whole music thing. I'd done different things with that and journalism and all this, and realizing that, like to a lot of that is having, front and ego game and stuff, and but being, of service and having a skill that reliably helps people is the way to go. So that really helped me commit to studying for acupuncture, because that was a 6-year, 7-year long haul process,
How does acupuncture, and you're dealing with meridians, you're opening up blockages, it's very energetic, like you're there in the energy. And how has that related to your Kundalini experience and the energy of that? Is there any correlation?
There is, but I'm not an energy healer. So I use the needles to open up channels, and I'll be, I take the tongue and pulse, and And I was like, is this one lung 5? Am I doing lung 5? And then I'll just get a little, there's like a little star. I see a little star lights up on the point. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing lung 5. So that's my little recognition and using the Kundalini in that way. And then there's a little, I come from the heart, I'm breathing into the heart, and then I'm placing the needle. Some people will be like, they're then going in with the energy and feeling into people's energy and moving people's energy. And it just didn't feel right for me. Maybe that will come. But at the moment, it's not how I practice. I get intuition from the Kundalini and get the sense that this is the right treatment. And sometimes a thought pops into my head that and I'm just like, oh really? Okay. And so there's an intuition to the acupuncture, but it's not an energy transmission. I prefer to just say I've learned a really good system of acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, and I use those tools that I've been given, but I kind of get out of the way as much as possible.
I said I'd always been a dancer, raved at clubs all through the night, seeking psychedelic answer, or just a way to get back to the light. Didn't anybody tell me this is how I'm gonna be? Mind and body of a normal human, but ripping through with Kundalini, oh yeah. Is it daily that you do work and say, I don't know, does it feel like you're managing the Kundalini? Does it feel like if you don't do practices of some nature, does it feel like it can fly off the handle again and just become a torturous shit show in some way, as it kind of was at the beginning, those waves? Or does it feel like the waves themselves have maybe mellowed a bit?
No, it's a shit show if I don't keep on top of it, for sure. Whereas in the past it was like 80% painful, maybe 10-20% in the flow, feeling connected, feeling good. It's now 90% good, but every day there's still some pressure, some inner sensation of just like, it's still really there, really pushing into my skull, trying to come out.
So where has it pushed you lately? You say Ken Wilber was big. Was there any other kind of experiences that it's kind of been significant, that it's kind of, because as you say, it's pushing you. It feels like there's this thing that's, you have to do the work, where maybe some of us are lucky that we don't have to. It's moving you forward.
Yeah, totally.
And what's the next stations on that train? What have they been like?
Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual Hindu teachings. James Schwartz was the teacher that really made sense for me, and he's teaching Shankara, a 7th century Hindu teacher who sort of, so the story goes, the Bhagavad Gita had kind of fallen by the wayside a bit, and he kind of reinterpreted it and got people interested.
Shankara.
Shankara.
Yeah, he's one of the big guns.
Learning that whole lineage, and that really, getting good knowledge of the subtle energy, the gunas, rajas and tamas and sattva, and understanding how those were affected by different emotional states and foods and everything, and how every day is a play of those energies, and if you If you play them right, then you end up with some sattva, and it feels nice.
And you put that into practice, and you found that it was effective.
Hugely. Yeah, hugely. But the reason I found it really useful is because, after, going on meditation retreats and having some deep, very blissful, amazing meditation retreats, realizing that there were still experiences that came to an end. And maintaining this meditative mind stream is a lot of effort. Like, you've got to be you go to a Vipassana retreat and Goenka says 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. And I just found that very difficult to maintain, And so you fall by the wayside and you get disappointed with yourself and, self-recrimination and, oh, I'm an idiot, I can't do it, the work I'm supposed to be able to do. And so James Schwartz came along and was just like, forget about it. Forget about trying to be this perfect monk. Just understand with the mind, remove the ignorance of reality, and you'll be settled in it. Understand it. Don't try and have an experience, because all experiences come to an end. Understand it. Use the mind to understand reality. That will settle you.
How did that settle in for you?
It took about 7 years of constant studying, 30 minutes to an hour a day, reading, listening.
It's pretty solid. That's dedication.
Pretty solid practice. Until just gradually you start going about your day. And like I say, that ratio of suffering to being settled, feeling like, the energy is in the background and flowing. It's not dominating my thoughts, or I'm not trying to have a big experience. I'm just getting on with things, and not attached to experience anymore. And just slowly, gradually realizing it's like, oh, I go through most of the day now without thinking about it. It's okay.
So this is the Stephen Potter groove of that you've hit now after 25 years of this, the Kundalini and solid practice. It seems there's a smoothness.
Yeah, totally. It felt like, I've had a good grounding in Buddhism. I've got a good grounding in, in Advaita Vedanta. I've created this vehicle. I can work with the energy and the subtle channels with the acupuncture, and I do the Qi Gong to keep things flowing. But there was still some knots there, and so I was kept on playing with it. And I got into affecting the brain waves using electricity on the needles. Because realizing that, that part of this, it's the nervous system, and it's crunching through the nervous system, and it's just, so I've got to try and regulate, the nerve, it's like electromagnetic, we're electromagnetic beings, and the nerve signals are electrical signals. So let's try and affect this with electricity. So I started putting needles in the ears and putting electrical currents and playing around with that, and feeling really good from it. I'm like, wow, this is juicy stuff. And then I was listening to binaural beats. I don't know if and synchronizing the brain waves and feeling good from that. And then I started to look at brain-entrainment machines.
So when just in a nutshell, what is brain-entrainment machinery?
So using light. So if you go to the hospital, which I did, 25 years ago or whatever, and they're trying to measure, your brain activity, and it's a EEG, and they put a strobe in your eyes, and they're just like, okay, so this strobe is putting you at 10 hertz, and they measure whether your brain responds to that. So this is a way that clinicians use to regulate brainwaves, so it works. So brain entrainment is using a strobe light effect to put the brain into a certain brainwave. Then you can use other senses as well. So there's the binaural beats is one that uses auditory for synchronizing brainwaves, and I think this is something that really resonated for me from where we came in initially talking about the music and how what a big impact music has on your emotions, your whole being is affected by the musical waves, by the sound waves, and it's like and then the brain waves, and those brain waves get into different states, and so that works, that's for sure. And then this brain entrainment machine I've got is also got cranio-electrical stimulation. So that's putting electrical current into the vagus nerve, into the cranium, and then you can set that at a certain frequency, and then help to regulate the nervous system onto that brain wave, onto that wave as well.
So specifically, you have a specific device.
I do. It's called the David Delight Pro. The guy is in Edmonton, believe it or not. He's just down the road in Canadian terms.
Not far from us in Whitehorse, Yukon.
Yeah, only 2,000 K or whatever down the road. But so I was quite surprised that probably the best in the world is manufactured not far away.
And did you just come across this Google searching? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I bought it. It's not cheap. It's a good few $100s. But 30-day money back guarantee. So I'm just like, okay, put it on the visa and get it. So it came in the post, and I tried it, and I was like, yeah, it's okay. I don't know. Okay, persevere. So I was trying it, and the lights weren't as bright as I thought they'd be, and I don't know. It's having a bit of an effect, but it's not like the wow I thought it was going to be. So I'm kind of like, do I keep this? Do I keep this machine? I really don't know. It's pretty expensive, and I don't know. Anyway, so I went to the library, and anyone that's been in the Whitehorse Library will know it's a magnificent resource that we have there. They've got an amazing array of books, and so I'm doing my usual, going around picking out books, and I've got a little stack of books, and there's this book, and it's called Yoga Does Not Work. I'm like, well, that's a interesting title. So I'm just like, I don't know. I go to put it back, and a little voice is like, keep the book, Steve. Okay. Goes on the keep pile. I'll keep the book. I guess I'll look at it at some point. So I go home, and sure enough, this Yoga Does Not Work by Jack Tom sits on the coffee table for another week or something. And then one night, I'm looking at this brain entrainment machine, just thinking, it's a lot of money. Do I keep it? I really don't know. It's like day 20 of the trial. And then I look at, and there's this book on the coffee table. I'm just like, so what's this Yoga Does Not Work anyway? And by Jack Tom. And Jack Tom cycled from Vancouver to Whitehorse in the 70s and got so in the zone, he had a Kundalini awakening. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. A local author, totally random. I could have been, any author from anywhere in the world. A local author had a Kundalini awakening in the 70s. And so I'm like, wow, okay. And then it goes, and he struggles to get it back and to try and work out what the hell it was all about. And he does yoga for years. Hence the title of his book, Yoga Does Not Work. He didn't find it satisfactory to reestablishing the Kundalini and stuff. And then he's like, but I did get it back. I can now switch the Kundalini on at will. And you know how I did it? I bought the David Delight Pro. I'm like, what? The very machine that I have sat here wondering, should I buy it or not on this 30-day money back guarantee? Do I keep this machine? And I pick up a random book from the library that somehow speaks to me. I pick it up, and it doesn't just say, oh, brain entrainment machines are useful, maybe you should try one. It says brain entrainment machines will activate your Kundalini, and the best one to have is the David Delight Pro, the very make and model that I have in my hands.
So you kept it.
I kept it. I mean, fuck, you know, when you get a signal like that from the cosmos, you pay attention, eh?
And and then did you start to use it?
I have, yeah. So I don't know how many months in I am, 6 months in with this machine. And, you know, at first it's just a jumble of lights flashing in front of you and a noise, and it's a bit overwhelming. And so I start doing breathing, box breathing, 4, 4, 4, 4, and you get nice spaciousness and just syncing with the breath. And then this strobe starts to form into a pattern. And these patterns are kind of like hexagonal fractal patterns that you might see on LSD or something. And they start forming, and then an inner space opens up as this strobe rewires your brain and nervous system, and it becomes very harmonious. And
is this in one session, or is this?
This is many sessions.
Many sessions.
Yes,
so
many
you're
sessions.
feeling this gradually over time.
Gradually. And the first thing I noticed, like after, you know, I realized a button I hadn't been pressing, and it turned it from a dim sort of light to a very strong strobe. I'm like, oh wow, I'm glad I didn't give it back before I even knew how to work the thing, you know. So I now know how to work it properly. And the first thing I notice is, so, you know, I do like just a standard alpha daytime sort of let's just get the normal brain daytime activity working properly. And you know, and I start noticing it's like, you know, I'm like, did that work? And then the next day, as the brain kind of wakes up, I get into work and I'm just like, I'm in the zone, man. I'm feeling good. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, this is working on the alpha brainwaves. And then I start to then go down into lower brainwaves, and then I'll do it for, you know, 20, 30 minutes, take the glasses off. And then if you know, like, you know, the flow state, and you're just hanging out in the space between like the flow, days of meditation normally to get to that state, you know, or total absorption in you know, in music or something for hours and hours, you know, and this is like after 15 minutes I'm getting this flow state. And,
wow, it's pretty effective.
yeah, really nice. So then after about 15, 20 minutes, I start to more consistently get these, you know, these hexagonal sort of patterns that form into an inner space that is like these patterns are like unlocking. Have you looked at
sacred geometry?
Exactly. Yeah.
Starting to get the fundamental patterns of the universe, or whatever it is.
And these are twisting and turning and unlocking, and another dimension opens, and then another dimension, and then another dimension.
And you're calling it a dimension. Is that what it's feeling like to you?
Yeah. It's like I am the you know, aware of these inner dimensions opening, and there's kind of like inner mists that sort of form and then clear, and then another piece will open, and then it's looking up and up and up, and the third eye is open, and there's, I think I can count 12 dimensions, and at the top of this tunnel is this spaciousness and openness, and the divine light starts to fill it, and I'm like, oh God, thank you, hi. And I'm back to where, you know, the original 25 years ago, back with the divine light in my life, and I've got a tool to reliably get there and just open, and the ego is not trying to grasp and make it and push for this thing and like, yeah, I'm special, I can do this. It's just, I just lie and open, and it opens and opens and opens, and if I can just not get attached to any thoughts, not get attached to any sensations, just allow, and it just opens, and then, radiating.
That's a good report.
Yeah. So, brain entrainment machine.
12 dimensions, you're saying?
That's what I've counted. Like I say, it's trying not to get too attached to anything, but I'm kind of like, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I think it's 12. Okay, and just lie back and let it happen. And again, getting back to what I was talking about earlier, like, is this just an experience? It's just an experience, another high, another trip, another thing that seems fantastic at the time, but then you crash back down and you're still the same old asshole with pain and a busy, suffering, stupid mind and stuff.
It feels like that to you?
It does to an extent, but also very, very different. So that I've been having realizations about the root of suffering in my life. So my dad died when I was 18. I was at this horrible football stadium disaster when 97 people died in front of me, and I was caught up in horrible things, and that all happened in the same year, in 1989. And it was just like this massive ball of grief and anger was at the center of my being, and all the other things kind of cascade off this.
And did it feel like that through the years? Did that something was there with this Kundalini and all your experiences, that there is this something deep down that you still hadn't been able to get to? Yeah,
100%. And it was very much a felt thing through my life. That there was this ball of pain and suffering. I didn't know what it was. I had no name for it. And it's like, okay, it's like there's obviously I think about Hillsborough, the football is out, and I'm angry about that, and there's a anger quality to it, and then I'm just like, and then I'm angry with my dad. I'm angry with my dad for dying, and I was just like, wow, and then that shifts. It's like, okay, well, what else am I? Well, I'm sad that my dad didn't love and support me in the way that I needed through my teenage years. And I'm like, is that true? Because now I'm not seeing it through the lens of anger and stuff. I can start to see it under a different light. And I'm just
this is recent through
this is recent. This is like another a fundamental piece in the jigsaw. And it's just gone into place fairly recently. And this ability to see that my dad loved me deeply, just as I love my son, just as the father can love the son unconditionally. Just this beautiful thing that I feel for my son. This is exactly what my dad felt for me, and he showed me in his actions. He showed me by taking me fishing when he didn't fish, by taking me to the football and showing me, taking me to the pub and showing me what a good pint was, and show me and good music, and we'd sit and listen to music, and all of these things that we did together, I had been unable to see through the pain of grief and the pain of anger and depression, that came from that, and that had clouded everything. And then through the brain entrainment and all of this stuff, it's finally cleared for me to be able to see from a different perspective, which is that I am loved deeply by my father, and because of the active Kundalini, it wasn't back. My dad is a real felt presence in my life, loving me now as he's always loved me, and there's no blockage to that now. And I can feel that. And feeling it as a Shiva Shakti union, yin and yang union, Mother Earth, Father Sky union, all these archetypes we have, but feeling it as the personal union of father, son, of mother, son, of this, yin and yang, all coming together in a beautiful, harmonious, loving life that's at the core of my being now. That I have that felt real sense at the core of my being. Whenever I feel a bit, irritated or despondent or whatever about, day-to-day life, and I'm just like, the heart of me now is this knowing of love, of true love. It's not something I have to try and conjure up through practice, through praying to the Buddhas, to doing all this work and spending hours trying to make this connection to the loving light that I felt 25 years ago. And God, please just get back there. Now it's just, it's there now,
Does it feel complete? Does it feel like a circle is kind of closed? You say your father's death, but there was also that initial experience where you heard a voice and you heard you felt that unconditional love of God come through that on that journey that started a long time ago. Does it feel like something has completed in a cycle of some way?
Yes and no. Yes, it felt very nourishing and complete and like a union. I think, we talked at, my 50th birthday and, we did some mushrooms and had a dance in the forest. And it was this sense that there's this, the star that I see, the sky, the cosmic energy, and then that settled into the abdomen, into the sea of chi, into this union with the earthly energies, and that felt like there's the microcosmic orbit, like that completed, and came just very subtly but profoundly to completion. But there's a great writer, A.H. Almas, of the Diamond Path, and his last book, I think it's called Runaway Realization, and he's just like, it never ends. It is a continual realization of realizations of realizations of realizations, and just be happy you're along with the journey, and the journey is the end, is the path, is it. This is the vehicle. There's no end. We just keep on going, and the end is that the suffering has diminished greatly. That intense suffering of identifying with the ego, with this fucked upness, this sense of lack, this sense of grief, this sense of anger, this sense of unfairness, and this just this intense suffering that has lessened significantly. I'm sure I'll still get, I'll have my moments of getting dragged back into and identifying with it and stuff, but now it's just like, oh yeah, I remember, and I can bring myself back to this, that like we're this nice place that we're sharing now, yeah, it's always available, which is great.
The realizations continue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's upwards and onwards now, just, I'm grounded in my, family life, in my, acupuncture practice, in my, sharing, music with people, and that's my base, but, open to whatever's next, and I wouldn't like to who knows, but it's become a lot more enjoyable to have settled Kundalini and a settled ego that isn't constantly, this internal tension and pressure isn't there, or, dominating my awareness anymore. And, I think that kind of sums it up.
That's a wonderful story, Stephen.
Thanks for asking me to share it. That's
yeah,
great, Chris.
no, I'm so glad you did. It's very rich. There's a lot of twists and turns and a lot of experience. So, yes, thanks again. That was wonderful. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
And so I reached the final answer. Realize now that there is none. So I just sit real quiet and ponder this thing that we call the one. Didn't anybody tell me this is how I'm gonna be? Mind and body of a normal human, but ripping through with Kundalini. Oh yeah. Wow. Another big, heartful thanks to Stephen Potter for coming along and sharing his wonderful story of discovery with us all. And seeing as Stephen is from Liverpool, England, it's only suiting that the musical inspiration for this episode came from the Beatles. The song "She Came In Through the Bathroom Window" from side 2 of Abbey Road. Quite possibly one of the most, well, it's hard to say what is the most beautiful music out there, but side 2 of Abbey Road was the Beatles not just creating a whole new genre, but they mastered it at the same time in the way that the Beatles were apt to do. So thanks to the Beatles, thanks to my guest, Stephen Potter, thanks to Liverpool, England in general. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to episode number 10. We've hit double digits in the McNuttiest dimension. Thanks to listeners, supporters, friends, all my guests. It's been, there's more to come. I'm just getting warmed up, people. So if you're enjoying what I'm throwing out there, stay tuned. There's going to be more. If you want to connect, McNuttiest is the only thing you need to know. McNuttiest.com is my website. McNuttiest on Facebook. McNuttiest on Instagram. Other social media platforms that I sign up for using the McNuttiest name that I don't even know if I really go on that much, but you can check it out. Who knows? Give it a whirl. Just try McNuttiest. YouTube as well. It's likely me. Again, thanks everyone for tuning in to the McNuttiest Dimension Consciousness Salon. It's been great to have you here. I'm Chris McNutt, and we'll catch you next time.